So everyone, thanks for joining me today. I'm Callum. I'm from the dispatch company in Helm WMS. We've got Beth. Is it Chapman, Beth? Is that how you say your second name as such? Yeah, lovely. Good. So we've got Beth from Starlinks joining us today to talk around the changes that are happening with the Minimis, which is a bit of a minefield. I know a lot of our customers at the moment are asking us how, if we've got anyone that can help support them with it, how to understand the changes. There's a lot of information online at the moment, and there's a lot of contradictory information that's constantly changing. So I think bringing someone like yourself, Beth, to support brands and customers and understand, I guess, the changes and actually get to grips with what's happening and what's going to happen in 7 days, 8 days time, is great, because it's 8 days away, and I think a lot of brands are still up in the air with what's happening. And I mean, we spoke 4 months ago, back at the start of April, I think it was 3rd of April, when Trump had originally started what was Liberation Day. And it feels like a lot's changed since
20 years younger then.
Yeah, I bet. I had hair.
Yeah, exactly.
Good, but yeah, I mean, lots changed, right? I think brands thought they'd had a couple of years to kind of navigate these changes, and then all of a sudden, a month ago, it's now been implemented that this is actually happening come the 29th of August, and I think everybody's scrambling a bit trying to actually understand what it means for them. So I guess thank you for jumping on, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about how brands can navigate this, and you've created a presentation today to kind of go into it. But as a starting point, it'd be really good to just understand like where we were and where we're at now, and what brands, I guess, are expecting come the 29th of August.
I think that's what I'll work through. So I think what we've tried to do with the presentation is start with almost a back to basics approach, and then I'll dive into the latest changes. So we'll break it down step by step. We'll also use a real product example towards the end, demonstrate what's changing, what it means for retailers and how they can adapt. So probably worth just diving straight into it. So if we start with the big headline, which is the plan to remove de minimis for all countries by July 2027 has been brought forward by almost 2 years. So from the 29th of August, which is next Friday, the $800 duty-free threshold disappears. It means every shipment, with some very limited exceptions based on commodity type, no matter their value, will now attract duties and tariffs, and country of origin is mandatory for every shipment. So before we talk about the impact, it's probably worth going through a quick refresher on the different tariff types, because there's so much jargon and terminology being thrown around at the moment. I thought it would help to work through them. So we have
on that, Beth, sorry, just as a really quick one, and I should probably say to the audience that we will be taking questions and answers at the end. So please do submit questions if anybody has any, and Beth's happy to work through them at the end of this conversation.
And if we can't get through them all, if we've got them, then obviously I can respond to people separately and outside of this. So IEPA, which is obviously a word that none of us were particularly used to a few months ago, but I feel like I say that at least 100 times a day now. So IEPA tariffs are special tariffs that have been brought in under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And that's what's been used for the reciprocal tariffs and the 2 separate fentanyl tariffs that were applied specifically for China. There's Section 301 tariffs that date back to the 2018 trade war targeting goods from China. There's Section 232 tariffs, again, also from 2018, mainly affecting steel and aluminium for national security reasons, but they can have an impact and with some econ volume. So they're worth being aware of. And then there's the standard duty rate, which is the baseline duty that every product category has. And here's the real doozy, they stack together. So for some products, you're not just looking at one tariff, you're looking at several. And I'll do a bit later. So let's turn to commercial clearance methods and what they are. So when goods enter the US, they're cleared in different ways. So Type 86 is the most commonly used commercial clearance method for low value goods under the current $800 de minimis threshold. Now, Type 86 won't be able to be used for any shipments subject to duties and tariffs from the 29th of August 2025. There's then Type 11. Now, Type 11 is classed as an informal entry, and most volume that was being commercially cleared by Type 86 will migrate to Type 11 from the 29th of August, as duties and tariffs can be collected in that environment. And Type 11 can be used for shipments up to $2,500 in value. And then there's Type 01, which is classed as a formal entry. This is also an option that can be used for collecting duties and tariffs, and tends to be used for high value goods over $2,500 or those needing special handling. If we then look at postal clearance, which a lot of people will be using, there's going to be a notable difference for the first 6 months on postal clearance after de minimis is removed. And this is important, as shipments will initially be subject only to IEEPA tariffs based on the country of origin of the product and will not require preparation of an entry by CBP. Now, this is only going to be until the systems are in place for postal entries to be written into the CBP system. And once this is in place, all applicable duties and tariffs will be collected in postal, just like commercial clearance. There's been a lot of noise about this alternative flat rate option that can be used instead of the IEEPA tariffs that would be available for the first 6 months, ranging between $80 to $200 per item, which is linked to which IEEPA tariff rate a country has. But it's highly unlikely that these are going to be used at all due to how high they are. So I would genuinely almost discount them. Postal guidance was issued on Friday night, which everyone had been waiting for. So it finally came out on Friday night, and CBP confirmed what will happen to parcels that have items of different origins within them. So, for example, if a parcel contains 3 items, one of China origin, one of UK origin, and one of Turkey origin, the 3 separate IEEPA tariffs will be applied to each item of 30%, 10% and 15% respectively. There was a school of thought that potentially it would only pick the highest IEEPA tariff, and in that example 30%, but it will apply the individual ones, which is some good news. Now, it's also important to remember that points of postal need to be more detailed than they've ever been before, including detailed descriptions and HS codes. So please do reach out to us if you need help and advice on those. And I should stress that through commercial clearance, there is an additional data point that will be required, which are mid-codes. So again, if you're not familiar with these terms, then please reach out and we can walk you through them. So some practical concerns. Here's where it gets a little bit tricky. So since de minimis was withdrawn on China and Hong Kong origin goods, no parcels from Hong Kong Post or China Post that are of commercial e-com value have entered via postal due to airline carriers refusing to become the liable party and take on responsibility for calculating and remitting the duty to CBP. And who would blame them? That's not what they're there to do. From the 29th of August, Postal will no longer have a DDU option. All duties and tariffs must be collected and remitted directly to CBP, which is crikey, it's completely gone out of my head, Customs Border Protection. So DDP will become the only option, with the onus on either the airline carriers to collect and remit tariffs to Customs Border Protection, or by another party if qualified in lieu of transportation carriers, which was specified in the July 30th executive order that suspended de minimis for all countries. Without the other qualified party enabling the collection and remittance of the tariffs to CBP and taking on the liability, postal viability in the short term has been in question, as the airline carriers do not want to and will not take on the liability for collecting and remitting the tariffs to CBP. Now, in the guidance that CBP issued on the 15th of August, the specific postal guidance, it confirmed that the liability can be moved from the airline carriers to the other qualified party, which is good news. So it's good news for trying to keep postal up and running before and after the 29th of August, which is something that we obviously all want. The airlines are now in the process of confirming that the processes are in place with the other qualified parties. That gives them the comfort that the other qualified party is liable and not them. So this is a critical dependency for postal to continue to be utilised and will hopefully be resolved before the airlines start suspending uplifting postal volume as the August 29th deadline draws closer. Now, it should be said that the postal guidance doesn't impact the commercial channel, which is set up and ready to go from the 29th of August, utilising the Type 11 clearance process, where the liability for collection and remittance of the duties and tariffs to CBP has never sat with the airlines. So for us, once the airlines have confirmed that the processes are in place with the other qualified parties, we will continue to offer our customers a choice of a postal option and the already compliant commercial clearance option. So please reach out to me or anyone at the Starlinks Global team if you need any help. Now, there is a potential curveball, which you kind of couldn't write, but I think it's worth going through it. So to complicate things further, on the 28th of May, the US Court of International Trade issued a landmark ruling declaring that the tariffs introduced under the IEEPA Act, so the so-called Liberation Day reciprocal tariffs, were unlawfully imposed. And that ruling is being appealed by the US government, and it's working its way through the court process at the moment. And unbelievably, refunds may have to be paid on IEEPA tariffs that have already been collected. So if the courts rule that IEEPA tariffs were unlawful, then items moving through commercial clearance would still pay standard duty rates and Section 301 and 232 duties if appropriate. And it is believed that the administration will find alternative ways to apply the reciprocal tariffs because obviously they won't want to give up on that source of revenue. And if that does happen, postal de minimis could be reinstated temporarily because remember, initially going through postal, it will only be the IEEPA tariffs. So postal de minimis could be reinstated temporarily until the systems are ready to collect those duties. So remember, there needs to be a system in place for postal where base rate and section duties and IEEPA duties can be collected. So what does this mean in practice? It's the end of the de minimis era. Every shipment with some very limited exceptions based on commodity type will now attract duties and tariffs. Commercial clearance entry pathways currently have the clearest framework for immediate compliance from the 29th of August. Postal could offer a short-term advantage once the airlines have confirmed that the processes are in place with the other qualified parties that give them the comfort that the other qualified party is liable and will take on the liability of collection and remittance of the IEEPA tariffs to CBP. And retailers are rethinking cross-border trade in light of new tariffs. So many intend to bake duties and tariffs into product prices to protect conversion at checkout. But without a clear view of the duty and tariff impact, then it's guesswork at the moment. So for us, we've tried to help our retailers. So we've tried to remove the guesswork with a calculator, which will bring clarity, which is ready and live at the moment. So there's no integration required, no API integration. It purely works by HS code, origin and value, and it gives the value of the duties and tariffs. So it allows our retailers to adjust pricing, duty collection methodology and customer communications. And the reason we built this was because it really matters, because the right strategy can mean the difference between happy customers and abandoned shopping carts. And we want to ensure that as retailers, you are able to make decisions and have the confidence to continue shipping to what is one of the largest e-commerce markets in the world. So let's work through some examples to essentially show the information that our calculator produces. So let's use something really, really simple, like a white cotton t-shirt. So it's made in the UK. It's got a retail value of $20. So under commercial clearance, what would that now attract? So the standard duty rate for its HS code, and what you can see on the screen there is its US import HS code, would be 16.5%. So that's the base rate of duty. Then plus the applicable IEEPA tariff, which for Origin UK is 10%. So total duty if we do exactly the same, and at this time it wasn't manufactured in the UK, it was manufactured in China, but still being sent to the US by a UK based retailer. So this is what I was referring to earlier about how duties and tariffs stack. So the base rate of duty is still the same. So it's 16.5%. But there is then the Section 301 tariff that stacks on top, which is 7.5%. Then there are the 2 lots of fentanyl tariffs, which were bought in under IEEPA. So that's another 20%. And then there's the reciprocal tariff, which is 10%. So total duties and tariffs due on that $20 t-shirt made in China is $10.80. So it demonstrates the advantage that postal potentially has over commercial for the short term. So if we have a look here, as I was just saying, that postal clearance versus commercial, we've got our white cotton t-shirt manufactured in the UK, sent from the UK, still $20, but we've only got a reciprocal tariff of 10%. So no base rate of duty initially through postal clearance. But as I've said before, it will become the same as commercial clearance once the systems are in place for entries to be written into the CBP system, postal entries to be written into the CBP system. So total duties through and tariffs will be $2 because it's just the reciprocal tariff, as opposed to $5.30 as we saw earlier. If we use the example again, still postal clearance, white cotton t-shirt manufactured in China, still sent to the US from a UK-based retailer. There's no base rate of duty, there's no Section 301, we've just got the IEEPA tariffs, which are the 2 lots of 10% fentanyl tariffs and the 10% reciprocal tariff, so 30% in total, and that's totaling $6 on that white cotton t-shirt versus the $10.80 we saw through commercial clearance. So again, demonstrating the temporary advantage postal clearance will have if viable. So for us, we've spent a lot of time on this. There's a lot of information that we've put out. We also have a specific US shipping update hub. So if you want to keep receiving clear practical updates as things develop, we post all of the latest news at our Starlinks Global US Trade Update Hub, which is available at the link on screen. So it's the latest news on the tariff changes. There's helpful resources on there. You can book a free call with me or one of the other experts at Starlinks Global for how the changes will affect your retail business. But the most important thing is it feels like as an industry that we're all in this together, and we should be helping each other and trying to put out clear, practical information and deal with a lot of the misinformation that is currently circulating. So I hope that's helpful.
I'm on mute. Look, Beth, that's great. Thank you very much for that. I think it was very thorough and very, very informative. I mean, it'd be really good to just understand a bit more about Starlinks for the people that don't know about Starlinks on the webinar today, and just how you do support brands and how you can support brands with navigating these challenges overall.
Yeah, I mean, we're a cross-border carrier. So there's a team of 80 of us at Starlinks Global. We've all been in the industry for a very long time. My background, I was one of the owner directors of a business previously that we sold to FedEx. I retired. For those of you that know my story, my husband was quite poorly. He had stage 4 cancer. Our story ended really well. He got much better. He's now retired. I worked out that I was really bored and couldn't be retired. And then Starlinks Global was started in 2022, and it's gone from strength to strength, but primarily because of the team that works with me at Starlinks Global. It is some of the most talented individuals in the business, and I'm very lucky to have them. We operate out of our facility at Heathrow Airport. But yeah, we go absolutely everywhere, but we have a real specialism in the US. We spend a lot of time understanding the detail, and I think we've built one of the best solutions out there with postal and commercial. We're renowned for having the lowest WSMO rates, the lowest loss rates, the lowest undeliverable rates in the industry. And we're also the only outbound carrier nominated at the upcoming Ecom Awards the only outbound carrier nominated at all, actually, but we're nominated for 3 awards, one for customer services, one for our response to what has been termed the US crisis, and one for our US services as well, which we're incredibly proud of.
Great, thank you very much for that. And if anyone wants to connect into Starlinks that has a system that doesn't connect into them, we have a platform, whether it with our WMS and Helm, but we also have a carrier management platform called Voila, which can directly integrate into Starlinks and direct into your WMS or ERP platform. Now, we have a couple of questions, Beth. First one from Mike Wally. And Mike had asked, and potentially just got answered throughout the presentation, but could you confirm that the ARIPA reciprocal tariff of goods with country of origin China is at 20%, or is it 30% at the moment? Now, I do think you covered 30. That, but just for clarity.
Yeah, so it's basically 3 lots of 10%. So it's the fentanyl tariffs from February, which is 10%, the fentanyl tariffs from March, which is 10%, and then the reciprocal tariff, which is 10%. So it totals 30%.
Wonderful. Thank you. Hopefully that answers your question, Mike. Feel free to jump in the chat if it doesn't. We've got a question from Galinda Lim, and that is there any differentiation on the tariff computation between a B2C and B2B commodity?
No, it's based on the declared value. So essentially, whatever value that you are declaring will be the value that duties and tariffs are assessed on. The clearance methods are potentially different, because if it's a B2B commodity, I'm assuming that it's clearing as a formal, but it depends what value you are declaring. And obviously you will be ensuring that you are declaring the right transaction value for customs purposes. Customs are looking very, very closely at anybody that is potentially under declaring or misdeclaring, or is deemed to have taken part in schemes that could be used to deliberately try and under declare the tariff values. So we know Customs Border Protection are looking very closely at some of those schemes at the moment, but in true terms, you will be declaring the true value of the B2B movement, I would assume and hope.
Amazing. So Daniel Ack, and I can't pronounce your second name, Daniel, and I apologise. But Daniel's mentioned in the video Starlink sent out on the 12th, you mentioned that some of the retailers are rolling the tariffs into their price. Would the online price need to show what part of the price is duty?
It depends on how the retailers are going to do that at checkout. Some are just increasing their product prices, and then some are breaking it out to show the product price and then separately the duties and the tariffs, and then shipping separately from that. The one consideration to think about is if you are increasing prices, whatever value you then pass to your carrier will be the value that duties and tariffs are assessed at. So if you are rolling them into the product price, then potentially that's the value you're then going to declare to customs, which means you could be declaring a higher value than you need to because you've inadvertently increased the product price. So it's one to think about. I'm happy to have a wider discussion about that, about how other people are dealing with it. Potentially just reach out to me separately.
Yeah, that's really interesting and really valuable. And the other question I have is from Charlotte Partridge, and it is, I've seen a lot of shoppers on Reddit panicking about the withdrawal of the Minimis. Some even saying that they're stockpiling orders as a last hurrah before the 29th of August. But there's some confusion about timing. If an order is placed before the withdrawal date, but doesn't actually ship or arrive until the 29th of August, will it still benefit from the de minimis threshold? Or will duties and tariffs be applied based on the shipment arrival date rather than the order date?
Correct. So based on the shipment arrival date. So that's, and I think that's the critical point. So it's midnight as well. So it's essentially Thursday going into Friday night. So our understanding is that for postal, it will be flights that arrive on the 28th, should be absolutely fine because the flight has arrived. CBP should be putting out some FAQs to confirm that. And then obviously commercial is at the point that it is going to be cleared. So at the point that it has gone through clearance. So the 29th of August is almost slightly misleading because goods need to be picked, packed, dispatched, fulfilled, processed and flown and arrive and be cleared prior to the 29th. So you're looking more like the 26th or the 27th. So you're going to need to start potentially taking duty and tariff amounts prior to the 29th, or you could end up having goods that have cleared into the US that you haven't taken the duty and tariff amounts for in advance that you lose money on. So it's definitely one to think about.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a question from Jamie. Hi, Beth. You mentioned CBP will be looking to update their systems to implement a full clearance entry for postal consignments in approximately 6 months. Is there any indication at this stage who will be responsible for completing this? Could it be a broker similar to commercial movements?
Yeah, so there's an ongoing tender actually at the moment that's been running for the last month or two. And they're working and looking for providers that will be the enablers of the system for postal entries to be written into the CBPA system. So at the moment, it's mainly technology providers that have responded to that tender. There's no reason why it couldn't be a broker, but at the moment, I believe it's mainly technology providers that have responded to that tender.
Great. And one from Russell. Is the duty and tariff calculated on the COG or on the selling price when selling through ecom? Also, what is the percentage paid calculation when the COO is Cambodia but shipped from the UK?
If I came off screen, I could look Cambodia up quickly. So if he wants to just message me separately or message you, then I'll give him the Cambodia one. And if he wants,
I wasn't sure if you'd had that on the front of your name.
Yeah. Actually, if he'd have given me 10 others, I'd know them off the top of my head. I think it might be something like 19, but I don't want to go ruffling through pieces of paper. But if he wants to message me separately, I mean, the cost of goods one is slightly concerning because that's not what the customer paid for it. So one should be declaring at the price that the customer paid for it, not the cost at which he bought it for. So he would be declaring that for customs purposes. Otherwise, I imagine customs will want to know why it's being declared at cost purposes.
Yeah. So we've got one from Ash. Is there a date for the government's appeal of the tariffs to come to verdict?
It's going to be another month or two. And then it could potentially go to the Supreme Court. So if they lose, it could then go to the Supreme Court. So there's a little way to go with that yet.
Yeah, and Sean has asked, and I guess it's based on the previous questions that Charlotte asked, but when would you suggest that retailers stop sending items under the current de minimis clearance?
And that's the tricky bit. So it depends what your model is. So for our customers, providing everything is and continues to be fine with the airlines, we would be processing up until Wednesday for postal, getting stuff away on Wednesday flights, because obviously we all have to be very mindful that if there's a flight bump, it obviously needs to arrive prior to Friday. So we're working to Tuesday and then Wednesday flight uplifts. For anything going through type 11, again, if there's no flight uplifts, everything that clears on the Thursday should clear as type 86. Anything that clears on the Friday will then clear as type 11. But one does need to be mindful that if a flight goes technical and it gets offloaded, it's not going to arrive in time, because to the previous question, it needs to have arrived and cleared for type 86 and then goes into type 11 if it hasn't cleared and arrived on time prior to obviously midnight on the 28th going into the 29th.
Amazing. I've got a question from Emma. I think Emma was just running a bit behind, but apologies if I missed this as I joined late, but how does postal versus commercial clearance work? Is there only certain types of orders that can be cleared by postal versus commercial?
In theory, there isn't a formal entry or an informal entry being written into the CBP system for postal. So it will be based on a declaration, which must be an accurate declaration. So there must be a decent description now. Things are different with regards to HS codes and descriptions. And there's some UPU rulings changing from the 1st of September about having to have a much wider HS code. Country of origin is also mandatory from the 29th of August. So I'm not quite clear what she's sending, but again, if she wants to message me separately, I can have a little chat with her. But detailed descriptions, HS codes, country of origin, all of that is mandatory through both postal and commercial.
Great. I've got a question from John here. Hi, Beth. We've been told that we can declare cost price if we are the importer of record via an EIN. Do you have any opinion on that?
I do. I do have an opinion on it. So it's a bit of an interesting one because there's a lot of talk, and I think there are other carriers on this call today that are actively promoting B2B2C channels. And B2B2C is something that any carrier can do. It's a simple logistics movement. But as carriers, we are not trade attorneys. We are not lawyers, and nor should we be giving advice as if we are trade attorneys or lawyers. And when you are the importer of record, as you will be in that environment, you are liable for any under-declaration or misdeclaration. So the model that I think is being outlined is potentially where somebody has a UK entity currently, and currently they only have a UK entity. And they're potentially being advised to open a US entity, maybe a Delaware entity, and a US bank account. And based on that, potentially that allows them to declare at cost of goods plus a percentage, which then works out being the transaction value. In true B2B2C movements in that model, typically it is a US entity that is a trading US entity that has bricks and mortar and decision making within the country. Whereas I'm not convinced that this is what this model sounds like. So there's been a lot of talk about that model of just getting UK-based retailers to open US entities and it enabling them to declare at cost plus. And my understanding is CBP are taking a very, very close look at that because those schemes are being set up to essentially ensure that people can declare a lower value and then obviously pay less duties and tariffs. So whilst I'm not saying they can't be done, they have to be set up in a very particular way. One should always take legal advice from a US trade attorney to make sure that the model that is being proposed, where UK entity sells to US entity shell company and US entity shell company sells to the consignee, and that's done at lower than retail price, that though they have actually been approved by an attorney and that CBP are happy with those. There are ways of doing it. There is the first sale principle. There are ways of doing it where it's absolutely legitimate, but all of a sudden carriers seem to have turned into trade attorneys and we're not. So I would urge caution and make sure that you get your own legal advice and that has been signed off and you're absolutely happy, because transaction values, if they are scrutinised by CBP, are subject to significant amounts of audit. And my understanding is you're going to have to demonstrate how you have reached that transaction value, not just taken the cost and added 30%. So I do have an opinion on it, because it's really important that retailers recognise that they are the IOR and they are liable in this situation, not the carrier.
Yeah, no, that's some really, really great advice, Beth. A question from Robert. If the T blank COO is, say, China, but the printing and styling is done in the UK, what constitutes as the country of origin?
So just say that to me again.
So if a blank T-shirt and of country of origin of China, but the printing and styling is done in the UK, what constitutes as country of origin?
Yeah, so this is all linked to then how much significant transformation an item has gone under. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not convinced, therefore, that just by the printing and styling being done, that would count as significant transformation. So my money, unfortunately, would be that would be classed as country of origin China, not country of origin UK, which obviously has a difference for the duties and tariffs that will be payable.
Lovely. Beth, I've got two more questions and I'm going to finish it off because I definitely feel like I've been using you as ChatGPT, but just a lot more knowledgeable. And you spelled it out just as quickly as ChatGPT, which is amazing. So thank you very much. But Charlotte has a question, and her question was, I've never heard of de minimis until this year, but now it's all over my LinkedIn feed. What is some of the worst advice you've seen about this?
Well, I think the B2B2C one isn't necessarily bad advice. I'm not saying it's bad advice. I'm just saying everybody seems to be advising that that's the way to limit duties and tariffs. And by the very nature of duties and tariffs, I'm not convinced that they are there to be limited. So I would urge caution and make sure that the way that it's been set up for you is going to work legitimately and that CBP won't have a problem with it. And then there's just a whole host of misinformation. So there was a lot of information that circulated this week about postal authorities that had stopped shipping. And yes, some of them are going to stop shipping. And there were some announcements yesterday, but people are latching on to information and not really understanding what they're doing with it. And the reporting earlier this week was to do with transit mail, not actually to do with commercial shipments. So there's a lot of concern about misinformation and people trying to make the most of it for themselves. So I would urge caution and turn to those that you trust.
Lovely. That's great. Thank you. And I guess my final question on this is, Glenda's asked, on the commercial route, a country of origin refers to the origin country of manufacture or shipping origin, thinking along the lines of transshipment.
It's country of manufacture. So to the T-shirt example again. So T-shirt manufactured in China, sold to a US consignee by a UK retail business. The country of origin there is China.
Wonderful. Thank you. Look, Beth, thank you so much for that. As I said, I think there's been a lot of really helpful information. Again, if anybody has any questions for Beth or her team, we'll be sending out an email shortly with Beth's details to get in touch directly. And any questions that aren't answered in here, I imagine Beth will come back to you directly to answer any of those.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Wonderful.
Super.
Well, look, Beth, thank you very much for your time. I imagine you've got a busy next week, definitely, that's for sure. But great. Wonderful. Cheers, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully that answers lots of questions. And get in touch if you have any more.